So finally, we're starting to see the pieces of Xbox strategy come together, and I'm seeing it here from Colin Moriarty's little missive that he did here, 23 minutes about PlayStation Games as a Service initiative, a logical idea horribly executed, and I'm starting to see that from what he's criticizing PlayStation about or talking about PlayStation's business model, Xbox has already exceeded and excelled with flying colors. I'm talking A+ in many regards. We can simply look at it from the more recent an hour ago, data set from Circana, where we're seeing that Xbox has how many games on here? 2 games in the top, 15 games for PlayStation's most played games for the week on its own platform. It's also got 2 games, and potentially, if we look outside, like Overwatch and some other games out there, you see some really interesting things. I'm also certain that even if we don't look at this particular list in terms of the top 15, you look very closely, you're probably going to remember that there are Xbox games even woven into PlayStation's own ecosystem, like Sea of Thieves, Grounded, and more coming or rumored to come. So Colin is now in the position where he strongly believes that PlayStation requires something that is bigger than your expensive single-player games. I made a response to the first 7 minutes. It took me 23 minutes because he just kept making points that I've made over many videos that I've gotten almost, you say you rake someone over the coals, but people try to drag me. But again, I knew they were going to fail because one thing about it is just simple economics is going to basically destroy all these feelings that we see on the internet. It's time for people to talk. It's time for people to actually have real conversations.
Sony invested virtually nothing in you in terms of content, but you're feeding them 30% rips. And yeah, they're happy when they get their 30% of a single-player game, sure, that's awesome too, and it's 100% if it's first or second party. But that's a one-time thing, maybe executed by an average player only a few times a year at most. Not everyone is me, spending a couple $1,000s a year on single...
Man, that's a lot. These are his receipts. That's a lot of spending on the PlayStation ecosystem. That's some investment, sir. Whew. That's 2024? Lord have mercy. Yikes.
Single-player affair.
I didn't even spend that much. And there's no way I could have spent. I don't think I can even take a handful of. That's insane. And I do YouTube as a business and invest all of my, game purchases, as that. But hey, I'm not giving all these $60 game, fees and all. So shout out to you, man. He puts his money where his mouth is. That's the spirit right there.
If you were like me, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But it's...
Aha! Did he just literally just say that them PlayStation fans ain't buying their games? I've been telling y'all, I just made the video about this, what's the name of this game? Rise of Ronin. Somebody said to me in my previous video about it, well, Rise of Ronin did this and, it sold, it was the highest selling game, blah, blah, blah. Then we go and look at it on the back end. Game didn't even sell that much. Developers are running helter-skelter and trying to port this thing to PC as fast as they possibly can. And guess who beat them to the punch? Spider-Man 2.
Attach rate is no longer the telling statistic, especially with games so quickly, regularly, and steeply discounted after launch, but rather user engagement, daily, weekly, and monthly active users, ongoing...
User engagement, daily, monthly, weekly active users, ongoing. Okay. Arvons, I hope you're watching this video because this video is literally here to point out that all this talk about these exclusive games and blah, 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 they're only up to a certain point somewhat effective on paper. But when it's all said and done, you really do need some serious revenue and some serious value to drive that revenue. Game Pass was already profitable and sustainable. Then they decided to add more value, but the subscriber growth could not match for it. They raised the price, and still, majority of the subscribers still saw the value enough to keep their subscriptions. And they've made it competitive enough where you can even still acquire Game Pass keys at good discounts everywhere. So already, the Game Pass user, on paper, they're talking about you paying $19.99, but that's not really Game Pass's, true value. It's where you can find keys available everywhere, by the way, or using rewards to basically boost your, subscription to continue to stay on. And that's all they need because you're still going to be pushed or pulled to buy the games when you like the games. It's your own, at that point, it's your volition in that regard.
Subscriptions like PlayStation Plus and the unavoidable Fortnites, Apex Legends, Marvel Rivals, and whatever else's of the world. Sony execs look at that 30% they receive from this passively, and they wonder, what if we became more active? This is where I want to make the case, as I already have, that the entire impetus behind their failed games as a service initiative is actually rock solid. Again, think about it from their perspective. They think, well, we invest a few $100 million into a new The Last of Us single-player game, and maybe we'll make $100 million in profit when all is said and done. We spent 5 years on this game. We made $20 million a year in profit. We can only do so many of these at a time. We only have so many resources. The margins are too small, and we need to figure something else out too. Makes perfect sense to me. One doesn't have to come at the sake of the other. Single-player gaming is still vital, no doubt. It's all I play. But the margins, you've got to go to games as a service.
And their competitor, again, has already blazed the trail and left them behind. This leak back then that was actually put out, where they said our pillars are already dated and behind the competition, is much more weighty than you can even imagine. Xbox literally snuck out of the whole fight you, I'll console you. Phil Spencer was singing all the weaknesses of Microsoft in their gaming division. We lost the console war, knowing that if your business is played right, it's of minimal consequence. Yes, it is. Because there's already Valve and Steam and Sweeney and Epic Games and Good Old Games and CD Projekt Red and marketplaces that are trusted and established that they could launch their games on, and had been launching their games on, quietly to make money and keep their studios open. Are you starting to see it? Is it making sense? Okay, maybe it's making sense. Maybe it's not. Let's keep going.
So that something else, as it turns out, was trying to turn those 30% rips into 100% by funding, building, and operating these games as a service themselves. This was in premise quite smart, and as we learned back in early 2022, when ex-PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan revealed that Sony would invest in 10 games as a service of their own, PlayStation intended on going all in on the idea with plenty of resources invested and bites at the apple manufactured, which is key to finding success in a crowded space where most games fail fairly spectacularly. By the middle of 2022, that number of products went from 10 to 12, and that summer, Sony spent an enormous sum, $3.6 billion, to purchase famed service game developer Bungie to help them out and make this holding official.
That was a bad choice. Bad choice. The way live service is done in today's day and age is that you multi-studio your way through it to get your games out and keep support going while you continue to launch content. Ubisoft has the strategy, but they don't have the wallets for it, right? And if you're gonna buy something, you need to buy something that you can see in the books is gonna get you a bunch of money. So this was not a good choice, in my opinion.
To me, this is actually the core of where, how, and when things started to go wrong.
Was that wrong? Should I not have done that?
This ended up being the biggest mistake they made, which really says something, because they've made a ton of mistakes here. But needless to say, they really believed in this idea and they put their money, time, and resources into it. The timelines were aggressive, which is how you know this holding really went pear-shaped rather quickly.
Yeah, you develop live service games almost as long as you develop single-player games. That's the reality. There's not inherently too much in terms of the difference between the development timelines. They take almost as long, especially when the studio, even though the studio may be, veterans at it, it will take just as long. I mean, I don't know how anybody doesn't know. People say this always, it costs less money to develop a live service game. I've seen somebody make that comment before, and I'm like, I don't think you understand what you're saying. The developer and the programmer has a going rate. The caliber of developer and programmer and 3D modeler and artist and all that PlayStation will hire has a rate that they're being paid at. It doesn't inherently affect the cost. What affects the cost is the scale of the project and the time it will take, for the most part, in my opinion.
In May of 2022, Jim Ryan suggested that Sony would have a dozen games as a service offerings on the market by the end of the 2024 fiscal year, which is at the end of March 2025. That means you and I'd be playing most of these, if not all of them, as we speak. The plan changed by November of 2023, however, when Hiroki Totoki, the man who would temporarily take over for a retiring or maybe fired or perhaps both Jim Ryan, in which he said that they had planned to release 6 of these 12 games as a service by the end of their 2025 fiscal year, which is the end of March 2026 on the calendar. Now, we know the plan has been trimmed down even further. We'll get Fair games at some point from Quebec-based first-party Team Haven, which Sony purchased outright for some reason. Helldivers 2 was one of them, no doubt, and Concord, oh, precious Concord, was also one. Does MLB The Show count? It's annualized, so probably not, though Sony's own infographics show they consider it a service game.
Really? I did not know that. Huh.
Did Destiny 2 count? How about Marathon? Annualized, so probably not, though Sony's own infographics show.
Released both on and off console. This is their live service strategy. This is their live service strategy, or this is their multi-plat strategy. Develop more service-led experiences within first-party roster, and then release both on and off console. Ah, this is their multi-plat strategy. Okay, we'll see how that goes. They need Xbox though. You cannot put away 30 million users in this live service market. It'll be stupid. Everybody else is coming to Xbox. No one looks at Xbox and says, I'm not going to take a few more million users. That's dumb. Them doing that to Helldivers 2 about destroyed their own chances. And that would have been a massively successful game. I think that game would have probably touched, close to the level of, a FIFA. In terms of, well, FIFA sells stupid, but still close to, in my opinion anyways, if it had an Xbox launch.
They consider it a service game. Did Destiny 2 count? How about Marathon? Probably not, as Sony didn't even own Bungie at the time they made these original proclamations. What we do know from reporting and leaks alike are many of the games that were in some sort of development before being cancelled. A Spider-Man multiplayer project at Insomniac, The Last of Us Online, which was properly announced by Naughty Dog but cancelled deep into
that Spider-Man multiplayer project would have been killer.
Development. A shame since I know people who played it and it was apparently great. A Twisted Metal project
that was basically Cold Feet by Neil Druckmann, because it's a lot of work to do live service, and Neil's a showbiz guy, man. I mean, if you really want to launch a Last of Us multiplayer game, you got to go get a person who is not really concerned about the spotlight, but just wants to punch out video games. Not Neil Druckmann. Neil Druckmann is in my opinion anyways, I think he's a showbiz guy, be in front of the lights and the camera and all that attention stuff. I'm not seeing punch out game, let's get it done. We've interacted with, from playing the Division, we interacted with a lot of developers, and you could see different personality types and different things that they put into place. And yes, everyone has their personality traits and stuff, but I don't see Neil Druckmann seeing himself. And he said it in their missive. Well, we didn't want to become a live service studio and start supporting a live service game. Simple.
Likely envisioned to somehow come together with the Peacock TV show, apparently shuffled between two studios before a bullet was put into its head. The Deviation developed FPS led by Call of Duty veteran Jason Blundell, though as we've said ad nauseum for over a year on Sacred Symbols, he's now working at an unannounced first-party team at Sony, maybe on the same or similar project. A mysterious fantasy game from longtime first-party team London Studio, which, when cancelled, cost the entire squad their jobs. And the most recent additions in the form of a Ben game, which I've actually known about for a while and can confirm its existence, as well as a completely mystifying God of War multiplayer title being developed by remake specialist Bluepoint. More on that obnoxious mystery in a bit. Add to all of this the hundreds of millions of dollars Sony invested into and subsequently lost from the disaster that was Firewalk's Concord, and the entire thing is an unmitigated plane crash, with perhaps a lone bright spot in the form of Helldivers 2, which I'll get to shortly. But it didn't have to be like this. I guess that's the point I'm ultimately trying to make.
Yeah, he doesn't even get us, man. We're talking about you.
So, what went haywire?
That's what I want to hear what he thinks about that.
Several things, I'd say. For starters, while I think Sony obviously investing what appears to be at least a couple $2 billion into games as a service projects was a smart use of financial resources in premise, because just one or two of those games hitting as desired could make it all back and then get rolling into this new space, it's clear that the partners Sony chose were largely all wrong, if not some of the projects full stop. I mean, think about it. Sony not only spent hundreds of millions of dollars on making Concord, but it spent untold more buying the team behind it outright, thinking they were securing a valuable asset that would support their new could-be behemoth. It's bad money after bad money after bad money for years.
I don't know, bro. I mean, Concord could have been revamped. I don't know. I think this is the part we're getting to, all the different executional pieces. But in my opinion, I'm just here to say that this business strategy has been executed almost pristinely well, with mistakes like Redfall along the line by Xbox over years. PlayStation is coming into this, and there's no going back. I think people don't realize it. Like, there's no going back. People are like, well, maybe they can go focus on single-player games. There's no going back for them. Those single-player games already, the pain point is that there's not enough revenue for them to justify the investment that they put in there. So unless they can balance things out, I think they're going to be on this particular path for a minute until they can continue to make this thing like Helldivers 2 look, somewhat uniform across the board. And I think that's just the reality. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I got to go. Thanks so much. Peace out.